Good afternoon. As Galen mentioned, my name is Judy Crocker. I'm an outreach coordinator for the Safe Routes to School program, which is run through MassBike. Safe Routes to School is not unique to Massachusetts. It's actually in all 50 states. The program originated in Denmark. It's in about 45 countries. So it is just not central to our own little backyard. The focus of the program is really exercise, safety, and fostering a sense of community. And I have to say, I think it's been, it has really made measurable success in increasing the number of students who walk and bike to school, and in decreasing parent traffic and idling. The Safe Routes program is in about 65% of the Massachusetts communities. We actually just hit 900 partners. The goal is 1,000.
Woo!
Our way there. So it is spread throughout the state. Safe Routes to School has a very large toolbox. And depending on what you need in our toolbox, it is really based on what your community concerns and issues might be. These are the most common. As I mentioned, exercise, safety in general, traffic congestion, think about the environment. Attendiness and tardiness is actually, if you ask to particularly any middle school or high school principal, that's probably number one on their list. And how to get the word out. So, as with other programs under the public health umbrella, our foundation is what we call the 6 E's. We do count equity as it's the overarching to click the umbrella, and everything else falls under the umbrella. But equity in education has taken on a different point of being, if you would. Very much in the news right now is the updating the foundation budget for the 1993 Educational Reform Bill. And again, a lot of this is equity, so we like to talk about equity. The first point that for the E's is evaluation. Evaluation is really surveying in our neck of the woods. So we deal a lot with parent travel surveys. We actually have about a 2-minute survey. We have it in 9 languages. It's very easy to do. We also do customizable surveys if you want to learn specifically why do your students take the mode of transportation they do. We can also do that. And this is pretty much what the survey looks like. It's about a 3-page document. But I think the most important piece of this is the 4th page. And this is a walk-in shed. And this is really just a point plot based on mode of transportation of where the students live, because we do ask for the approximate cross streets of where the students live. And for this audience, you know this already, but I'll say it anyways. It's pretty much like a target, but it's never going to be a perfect circumference circle type target because of different land masses. In Salem, we have the ocean, things like that. So from this, it's easy for us. We use this as a tool to develop walking maps, if you would, where the kids live and how they want to walk and how they want to get around. So education is where we spend a lot of our time. We do a lot with pedestrian safety and bike safety. So MassBike is one of our partners in crime on that one. The pedestrian safety is rather unique because it actually meets the state frameworks for health and wellness, so it's not enrichment. You say that to a school principal and they get it. We try to embed this in the gym classes, but in some communities it's run by the school nurse, and now this is special education teachers. Sometimes we, as in this photo, we actually have a small group of students, and this group, because we have parents who came in, it's very easy to train the parents, and then we all break the classes down and train the kids. We also have had a very robust peer-to-peer mentoring program, particularly with middle school students. Student councils at the middle school level really like this. We train the middle school students, and then they come to the elementary school and train the kids. So, it's very easy, and we do this outdoors. I like to explain to the kids, we don't have sidewalks, crosswalks, and parking lots in the classrooms, so we take them outside on school property. Bike safety is a little different. We don't have a bicycle for every child, so it's not skills-based. So what we do is that we do more bike assemblies. When we talk about personal safety, bike safety, and then rules of the road. The bike rodeos are a little different in that it is skills-based. It's more of we try to make it more of a community effort. Sometimes we partner with the police, local bike shops, local pet bike committees, etc. MassDOT's Safe Routes program also has a number of annual forums and webinars. And again, and I should have said this at the beginning, we have your taxpayer money at work, so everything we offer is free. Encouragement, this is the fun part, yes.
On the education front, are there parallel programs to make drivers aware of bikers?
Excellent point. So there are some communities where the individual Safe Routes to School communities have made it part of the contract for, say, driver's ed that the district might use to make sure they talk about no idling, make sure they talk about sharing the road with bicyclists, taking out the earbuds, putting down the phone, that kind of thing. But it's really community to community. Unfortunately, the Safe Routes program, because of the mandate, we deal with public school students, grades K through 8. So encouragement is the fun part. It's where we really celebrate how the kids get to school. And honestly, it doesn't matter how your child gets to school, we want them to be safe. So whether they are driving in a single occupancy vehicle, we want that seatbelt on, we want them in the proper side of the car, in the back seat, etc. We do this by having 3 flagship days a year, what we call. In the fall, we have International Walk to School Day, the first Wednesday of October. Just as it says, it's celebrated from Denmark to Boston. We have a winter walk in February, and we have Massachusetts Walk to School Day in May. So from that walking shed that I showed you earlier, we can create something called walking school buses. So I would say for most people in the audience, it's the way we got to school. You left your house, you walked to a friend's house, then you walked to another friend's house, you eventually made it to school. Today they give everything a name and they call it walking school bus. So theme days, a lot of communities, and again, none of these are mandatory, a lot of communities like to give a theme. Let's just try to make it a little bit more fun. So this picture here is actually from the Robert School in Medford, and this was Crazy Sock Day. So in May, for Massachusetts Walk to School Day, we had a lot of Celtics shirts, we had a lot of Red Sox shirts, Bruins. I think you get the idea. Park and walk is another popular item that we do. A little bit of engineering, a little bit of mapping, but basically trying to decrease congestion on our school campuses. None of our school buildings and properties were designed for the type of motor traffic that they all currently endure. So trying to think of local places where parents can actually park the car and walk the child to school and back. Everybody's counting their steps these days, so we're trying to just make it a little bit more fun. Enforcement is what comes after the education part. On our website, we have in English and Spanish written and video training materials for crossing guards. In some communities, crossing guards are through the school department, and others are through the police department. Either way, the materials are here. We work with the police. This is actually a bike assembly I did in Groveland, and I always invite the police if they like to come. Most police departments now have cyclists on the road, so they come and they talk about what they do in their own community. It's very popular with the police now to kind of give out, and it made the news, I think I heard last week, there's a number of communities who do this, give out, kind of congratulate the kids for doing it right. If they have the helmet on, if they're following the rules of the road, they might give them, some use trading cards, some use $5 just a ticket or free ice cream at the local ice cream place, things like that. This also includes the school resource officers. A big part of enforcement is arrival dismissal plans. Arrival dismissal plans get layered, and oftentimes, if you sit down with the principal, probably the number one thing that they like to say is that the parents don't follow the rules. And then I look at them and I say, well, I looked on your website, I looked in your handbook, I looked everywhere I could look, and I can't find your rules. So part of it is understanding how to make an arrival dismissal plan. It should be in text, it should have a map, it should include school hours. So there's a lot to that. When we do arrival dismissal plans, we do modal counts, how many walkers you really have, how many people are bringing their dogs onto school property, when do the first parents come for afternoon pickup. And it's how we communicate all of this, and understanding that rules apply to everybody. Engineering, I'm just gonna touch on it for a second, Galen. The engineering, we break it into two different aspects. What you would expect, we do a lot with the mapping, we do a lot with signage. Most school properties do not have or do not use regulatory signage. The rules for putting signage up on school property is very different than municipal property. So with that, we try to, but non-regulatory signs are not enforceable. So we try to kind of right that ship a little bit. And then also forming task force. So where does safe routes live in your community? If it lives with the school nurse because you do pedestrian safety once a year, terrific. But if you want a more robust system or for other program, using more tools in our toolbox, then we try to put the right stakeholders together. And oftentimes they're on the municipal side of governance as well as the schools. So the questions for this audience anyways, I would ask, are all your schools partnered? Oftentimes you'll have some partnered in a community, but not all. Does the community have an approved police chief's policy, as I just mentioned? And what are your concerns? The concerns for one school, one district could be different than the same school district across town or from a neighboring town. And what's the latest and greatest? What are you doing? Are you considering a change in school start times? Are you going through right sizing or redistricting? Do you have any school construction projects? The time to approach modal design is on paper before the building is up, before the pavement is poured, before the lines are painted. So I want to talk very, very briefly about the three really hot topic items for what parents and school administrators are looking at. Parent traffic. So on this particular slide, this is from Everett, the red car on the right, there's actually no parking sign there. As you can see, it's almost on the crosswalk. The crosswalk sign is in the upper right corner. The left line of traffic is legally parked. You see it's right next to a park, and that is all live parking cars. The line next to that is actually not through traffic. That's another queued line of traffic, live, standing on the road. And this is a two-way road. So that poor school bus is on the wrong side of the road. And the school is actually, it's at the lower left-hand side of the slide. So we try to educate parents. They are not in traffic, they are the traffic. They are the problem. This is another, this is from Lexington. So here, again, the school is on your far left. You have a car on the crosswalk. You have the two cars parked on the left side of that roadway, illegally parked. It says no parking. You have that red car just blocking the whole thing. And that school bus in the back is not going to the elementary school. As with many communities, we have tiered bus systems. Most people don't have enough buses to go to all the schools at the same time. So it's usually high school, middle school, elementary school. So that's actually a middle school bus trying to complete its route before it can even get to the elementary school, and it's stuck in the elementary school traffic. So this happens in almost every community. This is why arrival dismissal plans right now are a hot topic. So policy. We haven't touched too much on policy today, but wellness policy is someplace for school systems where active transportation can live. Again, complete streets is where it lives for the municipal side of things. Wellness policy is where it lives for school committee policy. Every single school district has a wellness policy. Second to that, though, which is unique in only a few communities, is traffic safety and mitigation. If you codify that you want to separate modes of transportation, that the school's front door should be used for the type of transportation you want to incentivize. You know, walkers, bikers, mass transit, school buses, mass transit, excuse me. The use of regulatory signage, publish your arrival dismissal plans, and having a process for changing the school circulation plan. If you ask any principal, they did not get all their certification and licensures and degrees in order to be a traffic monitor. They're not traffic engineers, so they should not be the ones making these decisions. So usually, it was mentioned at my luncheon table, if you have a traffic safety advisory group or something, traffic safety group in your community, which is usually comprised of engineering, DPW, planning, and police, that should be is this how all these stakeholders have to work together. There are many communities where you kind of, there's a martial line, you don't cross that fence. But this is where the school governance has to work with the municipal governance. And just to see what the differences are. Educating principals that they're actually the school property manager. It's not just what happens in the classroom, in the building, you're responsible for the whole property. So if your staff are always parking in front of the fire hydrant or in a fire lane, that doesn't fly. Or if people are bringing 5 dogs on property at the end of the day, that's not a good thing either. And so on and so forth. So, the schools have streets in front of them, and that's municipal. So if you don't want any parking because of line of sight issues around your crosswalks, you have to go to the municipal side of things. That's not for the school to do. So I'd like to come to a close conclusion with a few pictures here. So in the upper left corner, that's the Roberts School again in Medford. That's one of their walking school buses. The Roberts School, those children have to cross 5 lanes of the Fells Way every morning, every afternoon to get to school. So they have 3 adults in this particular group, and see how I thank them for wearing their reflective vests. The sandwich board that you see there, they actually got an incentive grant of $250 for doing a parent survey where they had more than 50% of the school participate. So we try to put cherry on top. The upper right hand is a cyclodia in Lawrence, where we have a bike rodeo. We do this every summer, so thank you to Lawrence. The bottom right is actually a walk to school day. This is an October walk in North Andover, and all shapes and sizes, come on down. It's just a lot of fun, and I should give shout outs to certain schools because you want everyone to include everybody. And so this particular school, or district I should say, the school buses actually drop off at a city park and we all walk in together. So that way everybody can participate. The bottom right is from Beverly, and this is what we call the Turkey Trot. So their theme for their November walk, it's amazing how if you go on November 1st, the day after Halloween, every farm stand will give away as many pumpkins as you can. So you get some feathers with your coupons from Michael's Racing or something, put a turkey face on it. Every child who comes to school puts a feather in, and this thing can sit outside right through Thanksgiving. So again, we're looking at no-cost, low-cost ways of just making it fun. And then in the center, annually we do something that we call the National Course for Safe Routes to School. And basically we choose one community around the state. This year we had it in Springfield, last year we had it in Lawrence. So we spread out around the state, and we really just do like a walking audit, if you would, and listen to the community's concerns, and we put together a report. So, and in closing, again, we want to celebrate our student commuters. We have an annual lawn sign contest, so this was one of the winners. And just to remind everybody, it's all about the kids. So, thank you.
Cool. Any questions for Judy while we have her? How many of you are in a Safe Routes community that you know about that you've got? It's great. Trying to, great. Excellent. It's an amazing resource. MassBike is a provider of some of the bike trainings that happen throughout the state. So we do work everywhere from North Adams to Nantucket. And it's one of the most encouraging roles that we play is to do the education. Now, we do more education than just Safe Routes, because Safe Routes is just K through 8. So one thing that we have to focus on is how do we fill the gaps. To your point of how do we reach the drivers, would not fall into the Safe Routes program, but what we can do is use the Safe Routes examples of what we're teaching the kids and try to get that filtered into the RMV or some other sort of trainings for adults as well. MassBike has also been able to use the Safe Routes model to expand our reach because we can be more independent. We can kind of find our own funding, find our own partners. For instance, in the city of Cambridge, we do work with Safe Routes to Schools to work with all of the 6th graders. We were able to convince the city council that it's worth the investment to purchase a fleet of bicycles and invest in a program where we can actually run 2 weeks worth of on-bike training for every 6th grader. The bikes live in a pod that moves school to school, and the city pays for it. This was about 5 or 6 years in the making, so this is not something that happens overnight. But proof of the model can be expanded upon. Now, Safe Routes does have a mandate to hit as many schools as possible throughout the Commonwealth. It is statewide, which is really tough to do because this education is not mandated, which means it's not really funded to be a regular part of the curriculum. So it's got to be a side-funded project through the DOT. Ideally, we do have municipalities that will find their own ways of implementing bike education from an early age through high school. And I don't want to point to Cambridge because they always kind of be the gold standard of a lot of infrastructure and policies and bike sharing, et cetera, because they have the funding. But another example of what we were able to do as MassBike was in Mattapoisett, which is down on the south coast. We were able to work with the old Rochester Regional High School and Middle School. It's this two-school complex. It's right on Route 6. It's not bike-friendly in the slightest. In about 5 to 10 years, they're going to have a beautiful bike path that's about a quarter mile behind the school, which will connect, hopefully, Providence to P-Town. But in the meantime, it is really just not a bike-friendly area. So the problem was, how do we make bike education a thing in the old Rochester Regional High School? Because MassBike is a little more nimble, we were able to work with Lime Bike, which is a dockless bike share company. They're converting all of their bikes to e-bikes, which means all of their what we call analog bikes, all their pedal bikes, were going to be scrapped. I thought that's a travesty. I was able to kind of get about 150 or so what would be scrapped Lime bikes. Corporate wasn't really too happy with it, but we were able to work under the radar. We had Mattapoisett get a truck, pick up 150 bikes, deliver it to the old Rochester Regional High School. Boom, now we got a fleet of bikes which lives at the school. Because it's a middle school, we were able to work with the Safe Routes to Schools program. We were able to get the initial proof of pudding funded through Safe Routes to get an on-bike program through the 8th grade, which was amazing. Now, to get that into the high school, we were getting the high school gym teachers to shadow us in the middle school, again funded through Safe Routes. So now the high school gym teachers were trained in what we were doing, and that they're able to implement this program on their own in the high school, which is outside of the purview of Safe Routes. But what I'm trying to get at here is that, we were able to connect all of these dots. We were able to connect all these disparate pieces, these funding sources, these quasi-public, quasi-private partners to really build a program, which we just piloted this spring, so we'll see how it goes. But they've got the bikes, they've proved the model. When those bikes die, which they'll die pretty quickly, there's incentives from the superintendent to work with the actual bike shops, so local bike shops, to actually purchase a fleet of arguably more durable bikes to have, and potentially work with the YMCA camps to use them in the summertime. So the idea of bike education is not just limited to one program for Safe Routes, but Safe Routes can be that spark that really ignites in your community. So I really want to kind of get that out there, and that MassBike can be a great resource for that, as can Judy in the Safe Routes program. Yeah.
Have you hit upon any great ways to address parent fear? Because anytime you talk to the parent of an elementary school child, they go, "Oh, I would never let my child walk or bike. They'd get hurt." And it's a belief system rather than a factual reality. How have you dealt with that?
Good question. Part of it from our role is to do on-bike rodeos, where we have a safe and protected area like a parking lot or a park, where we actually do events and programming to teach on-bike skills to the youths, but then we try to encourage adults to come out too. I wonder if I can pull up a picture. I'll ask you to answer this question too, Judy, but I'll point to the Lawrence Ciclovia as an example. I'll try to find a photo of it.
So part of it is education from the top down as well as the bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
So to address the parent fears, I recommend a survey. And again, it can be to whatever you're looking for. Why do you choose the mode of transportation you do? Why don't you choose this? Why do you choose that? And then from that, we can kind of dissect it out and look at the information. And then you kind of just go neighborhood by neighborhood. Most schools in Massachusetts are neighborhood schools, not all, but most. And so we have pockets. You find people who live in the neighborhood, and you kind of go from there. And so a lot of it is infrastructure, a lot of it is perceived car speed and traffic, and just the whole interface of modes. So if we try to separate pedestrians and bikers from the buses, from parent cars. So the first thing I say to principals, and they say, "Oh, it's like alphabet soup, it doesn't work." It's like, well, what do you want to happen? I want everyone to walk and ride the bus.
Well, they get dismissed first. Have the parent traffic come 10 minutes later. You know, there's some, again, no cost, low cost ways of trying to tip that scale.
That's really clever. Cool. And I'll put this photo up. This is also from the Learn Secretly. Judy had a photo of it too. But you know, the mixing of ages, I think, is a really important way to conceive of bike education. It's not just for youths. It's not just for, you know, a certain subset of the population. But when you can do an event that really gets everybody out, and sure, some of these bikes are not really that functional and they're not wearing helmets. I mean, that's besides the point of just getting out and getting the conversation started. And we're going to do this year after year in Lawrence, and so the idea is we, you know, not just to parachute in, but we really got to plant the seeds and cultivate it over time.
Yeah, we ran out of helmets.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, this was a fantastic day. And then one more piece of bike education that I will talk about is the J1 program, working with the visa holders. Oh, that's so small, I'm trying to make it larger. This was my Monday down in Brewster. This was, sorry, it's a little fuzzy, but the point is that we go out as MassBike, funded through the Mass Ride Safe Routes program, to do bike education for the seasonal workers who come down to the Cape. And they work in the resorts. They're coming from, this year, a lot of Bulgarians, a lot of Balkans, a lot of Dominican, and then Southeast Asian countries. And they're students. They're educated. They're, you know, well spoken. They're smart, but they might not know the rules of the road. So we're funded as MassBike to go down there to basically teach the very basics. Ride on the right. If you come from a country where you drive on the left, you're gonna have to look twice. Wear reflective gear, do your ABC check, the basic stuff that they probably already know, but it's just reinforcing that biking is an option for them because they come to the Cape and they might feel trapped because public transit is arguably a little weak down there and they don't have automobiles. So the idea of having a bike is a tool of freedom, is a tool for exploration, but they have to do so safely. So we have, you know, it could be a 15-minute presentation, it could be an hour-and-a-half long presentation, but this is one of the ways that we found of kind of interjecting some bike education in ways you might not have thought of. So if you think of your community, think of folks who might be recent immigrants. You know, work with your community development department to see if there might be just a little bit of funding there to run some bike workshops. We were able to distribute bike lights, and I have these as an example. These are super easy, super cheap. We have distributed 2,300 sets of these throughout the Cape. So if you're on the Cape, go to any police department, they have them. We sent 600 to Harwich, we sent 300 to Orleans. Provincetown has 500 sets of these lights. And the idea is enforcement, yes, they want to pull over bikers who do not have lights on at night, but instead of tickets, give them a set of lights. And little things like that can really make the difference. So it's a bit of education, it's a bit of, you know, getting out into the community. But I guess my point here is that we try to kind of cross-pollinate and literally just do as much as we can. And, you know, I do think all of these drops do add up to changing the tide in the ocean. Because really with bike education, there's not a lot of formal bike ed out there. Yeah. And I'll kind of leave it at that. Great, are there any questions about bike ed? And we'll stick around after too to talk about how we might be able to actually get more involved with your communities. Okay, great. I'll leave this up for one more presentation. So the idea here is I want to do one more presentation, but then I do want to do one more breakout group. The surveys that we gave the Mass Motion coordinators as to what would you like to cover at these 3 bike summits. And we did Worcester yesterday, Salem today, and Springfield tomorrow. One topic that kept coming up was bike sharing. How does it work? Who has access to it? How do we get it in our communities? And mainly, like, is it fair? Like, do we actually have the population that needs to ride the most? Do they have access to what's going on with the bike share? So we have Carl Alexander here from Zagster, which is an amazing model, and I don't want to step on your toes too much, but let me see if, yes, found it. Full screen mode. Does this work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll let you introduce yourself too.
Great, thanks.
Hey.
Yeah, thanks for coming everyone today. It's incredibly important work. I personally do a lot of advocacy in my backyard in Somerville, so thanks for coming today. Oops.
Just
It's like your
cancel that,
demo
yeah.
expired.
Yeah.
So we can use Salem, our system here. You probably saw the bikes on the street as you came in or hopped off the commuter rail this morning. We do operate the Salem bike share for the city of Salem. We do have also proud partners in Salem State University and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts on the system. So we can use Salem as a bit of an archetype on the implementation of bike share for communities of any shape and size. Dagster, kind of contrary to a lot of the other bike share companies that you see across the country, we started really operating really small systems actually for properties, corporate campuses, and university campuses, and then moved into the public space in 2015. So we went from operating, we started small, grassroots, bottom up, and from 5-10 bike systems now all the way up to 500 bike systems, 700 scooter systems, you name it. So we really like to build and craft bike share systems for smaller communities. You know, a few bikes at a trailhead, you name it. We really make sure that it is a community-driven process and that we're walking hand in hand with our community partners. So I'll walk through a little bit of our work in Salem here today. So just a little bit of background on myself. I'm the system manager, really just passionate, and I love my job because it helps get people outside, but also focus on what it means to have a sustainable transportation system, how we can build livable communities, and keep ourselves healthy, walking to school and otherwise. The Salem Bike Share, we launched the system. It's about to hit its 3-year anniversary. We're at like 2.5 years now. Launched in May of 2017, so still wicked new in Salem. We have 80 bikes as of this spring due to increased commitments from Blue Cross Blue Shield across 17 station locations throughout the community. We also have the ability for bikes to park off station. So for a tourist coming into town, it's easy for them to see a bike share station and then learn how to use it there. There's instructional signage, you name it. But we don't want to preclude users from ending or even maybe starting their trips off station. So you can also park your bike at no additional cost and end your trip at any public rack or to a signpost. And we have the technology and the operations team to pick up and collect bikes over time. We are an app-based platform, so instead of having large payment kiosks like you see with Blue Bikes at each location, which can be really good for like financial equity or technology equity, we are an app-based platform that allows our systems to be a lot more cost-effective and a lot more simple to implement. You don't need electricity at the stations, etc. So we are an app-based digital platform.
So you can't rent without a smartphone.
I will be kind of talking about that in a moment. You can. It just kind of requires a slightly different approach than we see for more of a traditional larger city system. This is actually a really fun photo. Actually, forget about that little text, but this is a really awesome photo we did in the first season. We decked out 4 bicycles with witch brooms and cauldrons for the front baskets for the month of October. And we did a lot of fun campaigning around that. And we're based out of Boston, founded in Cambridge, so we really love working with the city of Salem as one of our closest systems nearby in the public space. A little bit of stats on last year when we had 50 bikes in the system. We had over 1,300 members join, 7,300 trips. The estimates get pretty fun. I love the middle stat though, 2,800 hours ridden. These are trips by people who either don't own their own bicycle. We did a survey a few years ago. Over half of our riders, 51%, don't have access to their own bicycle on a regular basis. So these are net new trips, bike riding trips that we're creating in the community. Or if somebody just really likes the value of the sharing economy. So I really love that stat right there. And then we're off to a really good start in 2019. We added 30 new bikes to the system this spring. To make 80, and we've seen on a per bike basis, so proportionately we've seen a 25% increase in the amount of usage for the system. So really excited about that level of growth. We have a lot of assets on Salem State University campus and throughout the community for both residents and tourists, and we're beginning to see an increase in residential use as we grow reliability and convenience throughout the entire city. So talking a little bit more on building an equitable system, right, having that lens of equity rather than checking it off as a box. From the get-go, we really work hard, people on the system management team, working with our project management team and the city to help work on staging of locations that help address a variety of transportation and equity-based needs, making sure that we have placement in certain communities, particularly the Point here in Salem was a large focus here when we launched in 2017. Making sure that there's adequate programming around it has been a large focus for us working with the city of Salem. And also, in addition to the placement of the stations, enabling off-station use, and I know that like Lyme, for example, and via ride over in Lowell in southern New Hampshire, off-station, even though you do have some sidewalk clutter, which we'll talk about in a moment, it completely decentralizes the system, and a user can take the bikes wherever they want to in the city. We really want to work hard and well at making sure that they're using the system properly and respectfully about placing the bikes. However, that completely opens it up to a user not being confined to specific areas of use due to infrastructure or other limitations.
Carl, can you get a little closer to the mics?
Oh, there. Hey. So there you go. So for more financial needs, we do have, by nature, we wanted to make the system affordable. We wanted to basically give these trips away for free. It's $25 a year for an annual membership. It's free for Salem State University students, and that includes unlimited 2-hour trips annually. And if you're a visitor coming into town, it's $1.50 every 30 minutes to use. So by nature, it's inherently equitable. We do other reduced rate programming. We just did a campaign for City of Salem staff with the North Shore TMA in May for Bike Month. And we also do allow for cash-based payments via PayPal Cash. It is a third-party provider, but we do want to make sure that we are offering that opportunity. We do also have a set of bikes in the fleet that are available for text-based riding, so you can sign up at zaxter.com/Salem and then learn how to ride via text message from there using the keypads on the back of the bicycle. And 6% of our rides in 2018 were used via that system in Salem. Lastly, on ADA accessibility, we do offer 3 adaptive cycle opportunities. So hand cycle, side-by-side, and adult tricycles. We currently don't have any in Salem, but I'm talking very actively with the City of Salem about either for this fall or next year. And I think on the ADA accessibility side of things, we as an operator, the best thing that we can do is to make sure that our bikes or any of our assets aren't impeding a pedestrian's right of way. And that is kind of step number 1 to make sure that we are doing our job as a company. So why are we kind of focusing on bike share, and how are we evolving as an industry? Bike share is really great. However, not everyone wants to get sweaty before they get to a meeting or have the ability to ride a bicycle. So the industry is very much evolved towards a lot of different new mobility options. We're not all the guy in the top left. Looking at not only adaptive bikes, but looking to start at exploring e-bikes for people who need a little extra pep while riding. Or also scooters have come into the fold and been really attractive in opening up whole new demographics of people who otherwise maybe would have ridden a ride share or their own personal vehicle. So really, we don't see these as competing pieces of pie. We see these as entirely new pieces of pie that we're adding to this whole mixture of non-motorized transportation. So low impact transportation or micromobility are some fun phrases that have been thrown around. So we're evolving our services to offer that as well. It only makes sense. We are not going away from bike share. Bike share is and pedal bike share, it's a really great value for any community, especially if you're working on various initiatives to get more folks on bicycles. What allows us to be able to really get sticky in communities is building partnership, doing events with Blue Cross Blue Shield, with the City of Salem, on making sure that people throughout the community know about the program, know how to use it, and can get familiarized with how to ride. So we've really enjoyed our partnerships here today. And then lastly, this is why we're doing it. I don't need to preach to the choir, but let's relieve our roads and increase the amount of space that we can reclaim for people, allowing for public art installations, bike paths, parklets, and street activation. Salem does a really great job job of doing that, but we feel like we're a part of the picture, even if it's a small one. So it's really good, and we want to innovate for people, not just for our own good. So thanks. And yeah, happy to field some questions.
So when you've taken the bikes away from the docks, how has that affected your rebalancing of the bikes? That's one question. And also, how has that affected the reliability of the person who has left the bike somewhere that's not a dock and comes back and is looking for it?
Yeah, that's such a great question.
Can you repeat the question too for the microphone?
So the question was about rebalancing if you enable off-station parking, and that is a really, last year in 2018 was really the emergence of the dockless bike in the U.S. And so these are things that the companies are learning and how to operate them effectively, just as much as the users who are experiencing that very much growing pains. So we do see that if we enable off-station parking, especially if it's free to park off-station, that it does impact on station availability. It hasn't done too much in Salem. We have we rebalance do rebalancing routes 3 to 4 times weekly. It works relatively well for the size of the program here in Salem, which helps to keep the bikes on station. However, though, usually if you can also incentivize riders, which perhaps give them ride credits if they end their trip back on a station, or if you charge an off-station fee. That's actually a recommendation I have to the city of Salem. So if you guys want to make a call for me, that's great. But those so financial levers are a really effective way to do that, and that's in addition to operations focus.
Does your agreement with the city put any requirements on Zagster for level of service or rebalancing or keeping sidewalks clear or anything like that?
Yes, I'm not sure if our contract with the city. Some cities have. We generally have SLAs that are associated with the working condition of the bicycles, and we did not include any explicit language regarding the collection of bicycles in a short time frame when we enabled off-station last year, but that's always something that we're happy to work on SLAs around, and we have for other communities.
If you live in a town that doesn't have a Salem state or any industry that could help subsidize docking stations, is it possible to organize a few small communities and negotiate a lower price for docking stations?
Yeah, so like a collective bargaining agreement
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah, well, because we work with contractors to operate our systems in the communities of these sizes, there's not necessarily an economies of scale. So if you add more bicycles, the cost of operations doesn't actually decrease for us. But it's again, like I said, we are generally more affordable than other communities. It's still, it's not everything that every community can afford. However, we're really savvy on public-private partnership, building and fostering partnerships. We wouldn't have the number of bicycles here in Salem if it weren't for Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example. And you don't necessarily, in a lot of our communities, especially in the suburban areas, you're not looking at point-to-point utilization of the bike share. You're looking at, and going from A to B, you're actually looking at folks wanting to recreate, go on the trails for the weekend, and have more of a leisurely ride experience. So we have our program in a really great example of this. Salem's a little bit more dense. So I think a good example is our Minuteman Bike Share program. It's Lexington, Acton, Maynard, and Concord have a consortium, and they decided to come together, create one regional brand, and for $1 an hour, you can, just about all the stations are located on one of the trailheads, whether it's Aspet River, Bruce Freeman, Minuteman Trail, and they're there for folks to recreate. And there are some last mile instances to the MBTA stations that they want to encourage, especially in South Acton and in Maynard. And so for smaller, more decentralized communities, it's looking at actually a lot less amount of bicycles and having a very strong focus on recreation locations or trailheads, and then maybe specific point-to-point last mile cases. And with the right partners and making it happen, it's definitely affordable.
So your stations, do you want to
So we have various pricing models, but we lease our services. That was the question was, is it purchased by the city or is it leased? Yes. So our product model is largely leased. So we enter an agreement with a partner for a certain number of years to lease the system to them. And so it depends on any given situation. However, that allows the city not to take on this burden of large overhead where they purchase these assets and they now need to maintain and operate them. We include the product as a part of our servicing contracts that we sign with the city.
We had a presentation earlier about getting good data on bike usage. Can you talk a little bit about how you might be able to use some of the data that you have to influence bike network plans or other ways that you share it with municipalities?
Yeah, the city of Salem has been a really great example in that, and I'll bring up, it's kind of a little bit dark, but we share data with our services agreement holder. In this case, it's the city of Salem, so they have the opportunity to utilize data and where folks are. We share it in an anonymized manner, and we can look at where folks are going, where folks are locking and unlocking. So we have an opportunity to say, how are the bike facilities on I'm blanking on the names of the streets, but we should probably look to make sure that is the ridership justifying of the bike share justifying the recent addition of new infrastructure for cycling, or is it a call that certain infrastructure isn't adequate enough and we need to look at improving it? And I believe the city of Salem just completed their updated bike plan and did use the data that we've collected over the past few years in order to help inform it.
Kind of a follow-up to that, is it just ridership data, like a bike is a bike, or do you actually utilize like either gender or race or socioeconomic background? Because I guess what we're trying to get at here is can we prioritize some improvements for certain populations that might need it the most? Do you have that refined data that you share with municipalities?
Yep. So yeah, age, zip code, and gender.
Okay.
We have yes. We shared that with the city of Salem to help them look at it, and happy to look into that if anyone wants to partner in programming in Salem. Great. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Cool. All right, thank you, Carl, for rounding out our presentations today. I thank you all for spending a whole day with us. I realize that taking a work day and sitting and watching all the presentations is not the easiest thing to commit yourself to do on a June afternoon. To round out, I do want to get some feedback from you all, but I also want to prompt you to work in groups on kind of a closing question. This is a little bit modeled off of how the conversation went yesterday, and I think each summit where we're at, each location, each group of advocates and professionals is going to be different, but one of the biggest questions that came up yesterday was who's not here? And I don't want you to think particularly race or age or just anybody. Is it who's not here? Just put that out there, and why they might not be here. And I don't want this to be a criticism. I want this to be something that I can go as an advocate from your feedback. And hopefully when we do more of these summits, we have one more tomorrow, and hopefully we do these next year and the following years, and we're going to do more of these. How can we better refine, either it's the outreach, maybe it's the whatever, I don't want to actually prompt you, but think about who is not here, based off who you've heard, based off who you've met in the audience, and maybe a why. Not a how to fix, but just a why. But then I also want to get one or two things that may have struck you throughout the day. So it could be anything from how good the food was, to how bad the parking was. It doesn't matter. But one or two things that you can provide feedback. I do have feedback forms that actually will go into a little bit more of a 1 to 5 scale, but on the 3 tables I've written those 3 prompts down of what struck you, and then also who's not here and why. And I'm hoping that we can take about 10 minutes or so as a group, as we're winding out, as you're saying goodbye and giving each other your cards and your contact information. To just kind of have that thought as you go, and then I'll have some feedback forms in the back over there. To round out though, I do want to definitely thank the Mass in Motion side of the DPH and thank Dave Watson from Watson Active for helping MassBike put this on and attending. It's great to have your presence, it's great to have your input and your participation, not just the support, but this is really collaborative, and so I'm very grateful. And I also want to thank, of course, the Salem 5 for lending us this fantastic facility. This is gorgeous here. But I also want to say that we may be also up for an optional bike ride. I don't know if Carl of Zaxter is available around, or should we? Yeah.
We do have bikes available. Folks want to go for a bike ride.
Great. So if anybody's interested in taking a spin, and I'm going to clean up while you're all doing the final roundup, but I'd be interested in stretching our legs and getting a little fresh air if you're up for it. Realizing that it's just about 2:30, so I want to make sure that I'm cognizant of your time and respectful of that. So with that, I want to thank you so much for coming and spending your whole day with us. And I'm interested in feedback and in keeping in touch too. So cool. So thanks so much. Cool. So please break out into the groups. If you could just spend a few minutes at the table, I would really appreciate it. And then I'll have feedback forms on this back table here, and I'll present that out.
Go. Ready to ride that? Yeah. Yeah. Plus you already did your.
Exactly, yeah, I feel like I got this.
Yeah. Coming up. When did you decide to like it? Was it all the way from the get-go, or
I looked at the forecast. For a while it looked like it was going to rain